Welcome back to another episode of Business, Bourbon, and Cigars. This is where we bring you insightful conversations with industry leaders and entrepreneurs who are shaping the business landscape. I'm your host, Scott Joseph, and today we have a guest joining us who's going to be discussing the art of forging enduring and deep business relationships. This is something deep to my heart, and I can't wait to dive into this conversation. Our guest today is Rand Selig. He's an accomplished entrepreneur and coach. Rand has graciously agreed to share his experience, his knowledge, and his overall positive outlook on life with us today. He's also the author of the book, Thriving: How to Create a Healthier, Happier, and More Prosperous Life. So let's welcome Rand Selig to the show. How you doing, Rand?
Great. Thanks so much for having me as a guest, Scott.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm excited about this because I've started a Meat Plus Ultra, which is something near and dear to my heart. And I got to tell you, what you're about to talk about, I've said it, I bet I've said it 1,000 times. And that is, it's the number one regret I have, or number one mistake I had in the first half of my business life, is thinking I could do everything on my own. And so I cannot wait to dive into this convo. So I mean that sincerely. It's almost like I've lived two different lives, and the second half is much happier and much more fulfilling.
That's fantastic.
All right. So talk to us a little bit about your journey. I want the audience to understand why we should be listening to you when it comes to forging deep relationships, right? Why are you so passionate about this and helping foster, people foster deep business relationships? What got you into it?
Well, it's a multi-part story, and I think most of the parts are really good parts, and of course there's some bumps along the way, which may be even better and more aware of what I needed to be working on. The first part of my career, frankly, was focused really on skill development. You know, I had some talent. After I finished the Stanford Business School, I went to the caverns of Wall Street, and I spent the next pretty much 10 years with big firms, having increasing responsibility. I ran in the Asian investment banking business for 3 years out of Tokyo, right after I got married, which was terrific. Developed some brand new products. I'm one of the original architects of the currency swap market, which became interest rate swaps and so on, a huge $1 trillion business. So that was a lot of fun. But along the way, I realized a couple of things. One is I am an entrepreneur. I hated meetings. Meetings were not my friend, especially when they went on too long and wasn't clear why we were there in the first place. Yeah. But more importantly, I took a deep dive into who I was, whether I wanted to stay as an investment banker doing transactions, or whether I wanted to go off and be a forest ranger or something else. Well,
I was going to say, what was that aha moment for you that, I guess, triggered that?
Triggered the decision to stay as an investment banker?
No, to eventually become the entrepreneur and move on into other areas. So you're sitting there saying, I knew deep down, was there a moment in time you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Well, I never had any doubt about the enjoyment and the success I had in completing transactions. I never had any hesitation about that. But what I was struggling with was the environment in which I was living. The notion of having a large organization. My last position, I was in San Francisco, but the firm was headquartered in New York. And there's a huge amount of things. You're out of the New York thing, you're going to be a lesser entity. There were a lot of things going on that were really burdensome to me. And I felt put a lid on, who I was and what I wanted to be. So as I did this deep dive into what's next for me, I realized, yes, I was an entrepreneur. I realized that I really did enjoy doing these transactions. So it took a while because I was very serious about getting it right from the get-go. I started on day one with 5 clients, and I never looked back. I was very clear about my purpose, what kind of services I was offering. I never oversold. I never offered up things that I couldn't do. But that really began shifting to the second part, which is the heart of what we're going to be talking about today. I moved from skill development into relationship development. And probably of the 200 and some transactions that I've completed in my career, which is going some, I realized that I had become the trusted advisor to a lot of CEOs, a lot of owners of companies. They would call me up and say, "Hey, I haven't heard from you. We finished our deal 6 months ago, and I was just thinking of you and wanted to thank you. And I have another question. Do you have any advice for me on X or Y or Z?" It became very clear to me that these relationships that were based on trust, that were based on really great communication, that were based on a lot of mutual respect, not only got our job done better, but also made it so much more enjoyable. And so I just continued to work on that path. And that's been going on for several decades.
Did that come natural? Did that come naturally to you?
Well, I think I've surprised myself and certainly my wife by moving from being a fairly shy person, very comfortable one-on-one, to moving out. Technically, I still test as an introvert, but that means that I recharge privately. And I do my best work and I create my agendas as an introvert. That solitude is so critical for me. But I continue to expand to be a very social creature and bring it on. I'm meeting new people all the time, especially given my book, which was recently published, and I'm enjoying it thoroughly. And I think I'm bringing my best self, and I'm actually listening.
Yeah. Listen. Before I told you I had 2 different halves, right? First half of my business career, I mean, our tagline was literally "Move the crowd, crush the competition, count the money." It does not scream more isolated, just all about us than that, right? And it, I mean, obviously it was a benefit to our client. We were an ad agency, and still are, but man, I look at what I'm doing today, and if I had to say what has brought me the greatest joy and, quite honestly, growth in terms of however you would know, fulfillment, but even financial, it has been because of the relationships I've formed. And really, I think I was more of an introvert in the first half. And that's why I asked if it came naturally to you, because I don't think I learned it. I think maybe I just matured enough to where I got more comfortable. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really key part of this is the comfort with yourself. And part of my walk around has been being on many boards, being a scoutmaster, being a little league coach, and engaging with a lot of different people in different walks of life, different ages. And so I pushed myself. I pushed myself to get in front of a crowd of people. I pushed myself to be open for feedback and to offer it, because sometimes the best way you learn something is by doing it and realizing the intention was good, but the execution wasn't. So you got to keep working at that.
All right. So let me ask you this question. What do you believe are the key ingredients when it comes to building long-lasting, very trustful type relationships?
Well, relationships of both kinds, both a business as well as personal. I think there's a lot of overlap. They're a little different, of course, but it starts to me. There are a handful of these issues, Scott. It starts to me with your attitude. Is this all about you, or is it about the other person? And in the business realm, I think of that as coming in with an attitude of service. I'm not there to sell. I'm not there to make myself look good. I'm there to solve a problem and to make sure that I understand the problem, and so that I can work together, kind of like a partner, for a period of time with my client to get something done that at the end of the day we're going to say that's a great solution and we enjoyed the process. So it starts with this attitude. A second thing is so critical again in both realms of professional and personal, is rock solid communications. We all talk. We all like to talk, maybe only to ourselves, but there's a lot of talking that goes on. And the question is, are you also listening? If you're not listening when the other person's talking because you're maybe in a client situation or a customer situation, you're concerned about what your next big idea is going to be. You're not really listening. That's not very effective. So you got to just trust yourself, relax, listen well. Listen, of course, not to just the words, but also the body language. And when you get to know the situation, you also can figure out what's not being said. There are little holes that you can then investigate. And that leads to asking questions. The better the relationship, the better the questions. The more you can ask, and sometimes by revealing something about your own situation that leads the way to asking a question. It may seem somewhat personal in the business realm. It doesn't necessarily have to be super personal, but it's relevant. It's relevant to the situation, the concerns they have, what's holding them back, these kinds of things that allow somebody to, when they trust you, open up. And it makes a huge difference in the whole flow of that relationship. I also believe that being encouraging throughout. It's an amazing thing. I can't say I've perfected it, but I really like encouraging people, and I look for things to compliment them about. It could be little things. And if it's a junior person on the team that we've assembled to work on a project, I make a point of calling them out in front of their boss, saying, I just want to say that we could not have done what we did without your help. It was really helpful. You kept at it. I find something that's honest to say, and it's genuine. I'm not just blowing smoke and saying, "Oh, it's my time to say something positive." No.
Yeah.
This is real stuff. And what that does is it builds a lot of mutual respect. That they see very quickly that I know what I'm talking about, and that my intention to really be there as a person who's going to help them just comes right out. So they begin respecting me. They appreciate that I actually ask questions and listen to them, and I'm just not the font of all information. But it goes both ways. As part of this compliment thing, but especially an owner of a company, somebody who it's kind of lonely. Whether you have a board or not, they're not. It's small, medium-sized companies, the boards are not real boards, particularly, can be very lonely. And so, in creating this relationship, it opens this door to the kind of thing that people really do want to talk about. They do want to express their doubts and their worries, and I'm there for that. I'm there for them. And I'll just wrap all of this up with this other huge point, which is being positive. Doesn't mean that we know all the answers. It doesn't mean that our crystal ball is any better than the next person's, but the idea that we are together, that we're aligned, that we continue to make sure we're aligned, and then we can be positive. And maybe it's a rainy day. Okay, tomorrow might be sunny. And we may have tried this and it didn't work. That's okay. Let's keep going. Being relentless about it and being cheerful. Huge.
So we talked in the intro about you discussing the positive outlook on life. I wrote down 4 words in everything you just said. All right. And I feel like they all kind of go with that. And then I'm going to come back to the first point you made because I want to talk about that a little bit. Give, positive, listen, intent. And when you were discussing intent, you were talking about, good intentions, things such as that. All of those steer towards a positive, caring, right? A caring thing about whoever you're talking to or whatever relationship you're in, whether it's business or not. And I wanted to go back to the very first point you made on this, and that was this positive attitude, but then you went straight into giving. And this is key, and this is the reason I want the audience to understand this. To me, I have noticed that the more I give, the more I receive. However, I want to be very clear about this. I do not give because in my mind, I'm thinking, I know if I give, I will receive. You have to genuinely have the right intent, right? And have, I believe I'm very good at connecting people. Like, I might connect you to someone else I know. I said, these 2 people need to get together because they can help each other, right? I don't do it because I want anything in return. I expect nothing in return. It just really makes me feel good. And I think whatever happened in my life where that shift started to happen, that's I think the easiest part that's made me go from an introvert to an extrovert is that, because I think early on it was very much about growing my business and what can I get? How do I get it from me? And it was all about that. And now it is really focused on, I just really enjoy aligning people, connecting them, letting them discover new business opportunities, ideas, whatever it might be. But I've noticed it's almost like the more I pour into people, I don't even expect it comes from every angle. It's like the weirdest dynamic.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Of course, I'm totally dialed into what you're talking about. Resonates so deeply with me. There's a quote. My book has lots and lots of quotes, and people are telling me they're so well located in your book that it just amplifies the point you're making. There's a quote by Winston Churchill, the great Winston Churchill, and he said something along the lines of, "We make a living by what we get, and we make a life by what we give."
Yeah.
And this really pours into another very important point, Scott, which is what is success? And a lot of people are really very narrowly focused, and it's just the counting, the metric of net worth or money in or something. I've met so many wealthy people in my career and my life who are not successful by my definition. They have done well financially, but their relationships are a mess. They're not happy. Not happy because for a lot of reasons. One has to do with this relationship issue that we're talking about, but another issue has to do with their focus is in the wrong place. Yeah. They're focusing on an external focus. They're focusing on the neighbor, the boss, the coworker, somebody they talked to who took a really fancy, expensive vacation. They're not looking inside themselves to really understand who they are, what really matters to them, even if they're the only person who thinks that that's important.
Yeah.
Swimming against the tide takes a lot of courage. But those people who I've met, who I think are genuinely successful and happy, and turn out to be healthy emotionally and physically, all those things are the people who are focusing inside first and then taking that out.
So let's focus on a situation where you yourself experienced, where you forged some experience you've had where you forged a really deep relationship.
Yeah.
How has that led to some significant opportunity or growth for you personally or professionally?
Yeah. Well, I can pick so many examples of that, but let me relate one to you and your listeners, which is a fairly recent business transaction. It's a merger, not an acquisition. So it was really important that we double check to make sure this was, a group we wanted to live with together for whoever knows how long that would be. I affectionately called this a David and Goliath situation. My client, very large, successful company, paled in comparison. It was, 1/50th of the size of the merger partner. And so I rallied my team together. Again, I started off by exploring what our objectives were, what their objectives were, and how, what role I could play. And they wanted me to be the coach and quarterback, which is my preferred role. And we went through, and I said, one thing that's absolutely critical here. We did our research on these folks who wanted to merge. And I said, they know they feel very good about their business. It's third generation. They think they have the recipe to everything that's going to come our way, and we are going to be the little guys, and often not even invited to a meeting or invited to share opinions or design ideas or whatever, which we know a lot about. So it's critical that we set a level playing field from the get-go. Yeah. That's the only way, from everything I'm hearing from all the senior team, the only way a merger partner is going to be a happy partner. So we created, I would think, Scott, the best presentation. I've made thousands of presentations, and I think they're all been very, very good technically, and they made the point. They were all well orchestrated. This was my best. I choreographed it so that every one of the senior team talked, had a particular area of the presentation that they owned and presented. I did a wrap up, which ended with some of the boundaries of what the transaction was that we were looking for. Talked about time frames, talked about some of those things, talked about some financial valuation things, and they were amazed. The partner, the potential partner, came away saying, "Our respect for you has grown enormously. We respected you in terms of what your products were in the marketplace, but now we have a sense of you as a dynamic team." And my role was to just bring the best out of these people. They had not really had that opportunity before, and it was fantastic. As it turns out, unanimously we said we don't want to do the merger. Our team said no, I was the last guy to talk. I actually sort of summarized everybody else's point and put my absolute agreement on it. This was not the right partner. And rather than that relationship being, "Thank you very much, you've saved us from a disaster," they said, "We have 3 other things we want to work with you on, including a merger with a smaller company." And that merger company came to me and said, "We want to work with you at the same time. We trust you so much that we want to work with side by side with both companies at the same time," which takes a lot of integrity and professional chops to pull that off,
Yeah.
because you can favor one side very easily over another.
All right. So I want to make sure I understand this. So you're basically saying you did eventually merge with two different companies, either overlapping times or at the same time, correct?
Yeah, the big one we said no to, and then
Right.
two other things came my way, and I worked to make them happen. And they were great.
So the reason I'm asking this is because to me, it's a great example. We're sitting here talking about forging enduring and deep business relationships. How many times have you heard people say, yeah, we merged. It was awesome. Loved it. Love that merger. You never hear it.
No, the landscape is absolutely littered with failed, and it could be not just a merger; it could also be the sale, the absolute acquisition, where the homework wasn't done. So one of the things I think my firm has been sensational at is starting with objectives, because money plays a role in every transaction like that, but it's rarely the only thing, and sometimes it's not even the most important thing. Future roles, what's going to happen to the other employees, the name on the door, roles and responsibilities. These things are really, really important too. And, you forget about those things and ignore them because there was the fancy dollar sign there, and you've just done yourself some harm.
So let's talk a little bit about your book. All right. So in Thriving, how to create a healthier, happier, and more prosperous life. You talk a lot about the importance of emotional health.
Yeah.
How does emotional health, or well-being, I should say, contribute to successful business relationships? How do they go together?
I think they're indispensable. Absolutely indispensable. There are a number of things that I mean when I talk about being emotionally healthy. And I'm not a psychiatrist. I do have a degree in psychology, and it's helped me in lots of ways. But I'm not a professional. I'm not licensed in that way. So what I'm talking about are things that are really within our bailiwicks, things that we can do without having to lie down on the couch for that little session. And let me just explain a few of these items that play into this, that also lead a lot to the idea of being emotionally healthy myself, as well as in my relationship with somebody else and helping them become emotionally healthy. So one is a thing that a lot of people do is they don't get into the game. They say, oh, I can't do that. There's no point in pursuing that opportunity. I'm not going to even follow through with this possibility. This person, they seem like they're a nice person, but I think they're just really trying to be polite to me. They're not really interested in me. That's called self-sabotaging, and you're shooting yourself in the foot. So when I see that, I don't do that. I don't recall having done that in a very, very long time. But I see other people doing it. And I call them out on it, and I breathe confidence and life into them, because just stopping yourself out without giving yourself a chance is not fair to yourself. A second thing is we all come at things in life where there have been some issues where we did something we don't like. We look back and say, "Wow, that I didn't do." I feel badly. I'm embarrassed by it. Or maybe somebody did something to you, intentionally or unintentionally. And so the whole practice of really working on forgiving yourself and learning from your mistakes, and then forgiving others. Again, you don't have to fully diagnose whether it was intentional or unintentional. You just need to go there. And if there's no future relationship, that's okay. The point is not to weigh yourself down with these burdens. Another one is learning to let go. Now, I think a huge part of the success I've had in my personal as well as my professional life is because I've been in control. I like being in control.
Yeah.
I work hard at being in control. But I've discovered along the way, that as I've become a little more humble, that I don't control, really, frankly, all that much. I may open the door to some possibilities, but without other folks joining in and agreeing, it's either not going to happen at all or it's not going to happen very well. So I've had to learn to let go. And I do this little exercise. Maybe I could do it here while we're together. So you're holding on to something. So go ahead, Scott. Hold your fist up and you're
And
holding onto something, hold tight. You've not been able to let go, even though you say, and you've said for a while, I want to let go of that. You see your white knuckles there?
yep.
You're holding tight. Okay, now turn your fist over. You see some more white knuckles. You're still not letting go. And you're still saying to yourself, well, I want to let go of that, but can't. Well, now, recognizing one of the big themes in my book, the enormous power we have to make choices, you decide, I am going to let go, and I'm going to let go now. And so now, slowly open up your fingers, wiggle your fingers, your thumb, and you lose that heavy weight. And what happens is your hand kind of rises up.
Yeah.
You're free and flexible. And so learning to let go is another emotionally healthy thing. I don't do it very often. When I first discovered this little practice, created this practice, I was doing it like every other day. And now when it comes up, I just do this little exercise with myself. I smile and bing, I'm much more practiced. It's kind of like muscle that's working. I've got a couple more that I really want to highlight because they're essential. And I've seen this up close and personal with people who came to me. I sold their company. They had their bucket list, and I saw them 2 years later, and they were a shadow of their former selves. They no longer had the challenges they once had. Maybe not some of the frustrations either. That's good. Their network, their social group shrunk enormously, and they didn't have purpose anymore. And so all of a sudden they weren't happy. They weren't engaged. So having purpose all the way to the end, regardless of whether you're retired or not, it's a purpose you define. It doesn't have to be some headline grabbing thing. It's just something you believe in. I'm giving a talk coming up at a retirement home, and I'm going to talk about this. Even if having purpose means being nice to the people there that are living with you, that's a great purpose.
Yeah.
And then just being curious is another element to being emotionally healthy. And yeah, of course, it makes more fun if you're curious, but there's a big bonus in the emotional health thing, and it relates to communicating. If you're curious, you can suspend judgment for a bit. You can ask some questions like, why are you saying that's very interesting? Tell me more about that. Like you're thinking to yourself, there's no way I believe that. That I just can't imagine you doing that or thinking that or being that way. But tell me more. Not sitting there going, what a curmudgeon you are. It allows a whole
Don't be
new
using
way.
don't be using too big of words.
It could really be helpful in conflict resolution. This is the key to it. And we all have conflicts that need to get resolved, and being curious helps with that. And I'll end up, and I don't mean to go on and on about this because, this is a rich topic, but being grateful. And that too is a habit. And being grateful about the relationships you have, being grateful about, just find something. Doesn't take that much effort to find something. You can go, I am really grateful for this thing. And there might be 5 things that I wish were different, but I'm grateful for that thing.
So one of the things I do, I've got I think a pretty strong daily routine. Every now and then I get a little off track where I stay up a little too late. I don't get the proper sleep I want. But other than that, you brought up grateful, and I'm going to kind of work backwards a little bit with some of the things you just said. One of the things that's been a big switch for me is every night before I go to bed, I have a journal. I journal, and I've got my own personal mission statement, and I like to write down the things I did during the day that are helping me move towards accomplishing that mission. But I also write a lot of and by the way, if I do some things during the day that move me in the opposite direction, I write those down, and I also try to jot down why I might have done them. I have a little self-reflection on that. But I always end with what I'm grateful for. What happened to me that I'm grateful for? And I write it every day. I'm going to tell you one thing I did, and I got this actually got this idea from a book, and I cannot believe I can't remember the name of this book because I'm an avid reader. I mean, I read nonstop. I did this for my wife. I'll never top this Christmas gift. So in January, I want to say it was, I didn't start it till like maybe the middle of January. But every day, in addition to my own journal, I wrote down, and this could have been one sentence, it could have been multiple paragraphs, but I document the day, and I would write down something different or unique that I was grateful for or that I loved about her. I did it it wasn't a full 365 because Christmas comes before the end of the year, and I started mid-January, but almost 365 days. And it's hard in the sense that you're always you can't remember what you've already said, right? Without having to go through all the pages. But really all it is about, it could have been something as simple as, I just like the way her hair looked that day, or some little thing she might have said to me that got my attention, or something flirtatious maybe that she said, whatever it might have been. And some things could have been really a little deeper, right? Just whatever happened for that day. You'd have thought that was by first off, I did it for her, but it really helped me. I mean, when you're writing every day about your spouse, about what you love and what you're grateful for, I mean, it really it does something to you. But I will tell you this: I'll never be able to top the gift ever. I mean, she teared up. I mean, it was the least expensive gift I've ever given her, but the best one, for all the right reasons, and so I love when you said the grateful thing. And then you brought up a lot about in control, letting go. It's not just what it does to you emotionally, that's one thing. And it probably has huge benefits, but you can't scale your business without letting go. Unless you have people that you've, elevated and delegated and trust, work well with, there's no way you can scale your business in a big way. So that's a requirement. Letting go, there's no way around it. And I've got multiple businesses. I've got car dealerships, which I used to be involved in more early on. And I've got the agency, which I founded, and that's been over 30 years. And that was my baby, right? That's the one that got me the ability to buy the stores and all this other stuff. And what I noticed was, as that agency was going and it pivots to full-on digital marketing, things like that, I wasn't as in touch with some clients and or keeping up with all the things I needed to learn, whereas I had a young president who was all about the digital and was always in touch with clients. And I was becoming increasingly frustrated with the agency for multiple reasons. I didn't know as much as I used to know. And at the same time, I was doing this. just like you just said, gripping tight, right? In control, holding on. And I asked myself one day, I said, Scott, why are you so happy with the auto dealerships? And because I don't do anything. That's one reason. I like, it's the easiest thing I've ever done. And so I finally let go of the agency, and he just, got it right back cranking again, almost immediately. And sometimes we handcuff and we're just so, I don't know. And some of it might be ego. I don't know what it is, but, I'm sure there's fear in there of thinking you're the only ego, and the fear of thinking you're the only one that can do it, whatever it might be. But so a couple of those things you said really hit home. I want to talk to something else now that we're on this track. And I noticed this with our Me Plus Ultra group and our Business Bourbon and Cigar group. We have a lot in this group. There's a lot of big egos, a lot of very successful people. And we have a very diverse group. I've got people that are just starting off in entrepreneurs. I've got people making, 50 to 100 million a year in this group. So it is all over the board. However, for whatever reason, people are really willing to leave the ego at the door, whether it's our virtual meetings or our in-person meetings. And they get very vulnerable. And I guess that's, and you can't solve issues or problems if you're always afraid about unless you're willing to kind of put that out there. Right. And so I'm going to ask you, what role does vulnerability play in terms of building trust and rapport with your business partners or your clients?
Well, I think being vulnerable is indispensable. Indispensable. One, and people have said this to me. You are such an attractive person because you're vulnerable. You share some of your mistakes or share some of your uncertainties about things. And I'm talking about in the business environment as well as the personal one. It just opens this door to you being seen as a real person, a person that in some ways may reflect some things that they have going on for themselves that they haven't really wanted to talk to anybody about or maybe even to themselves about. Yeah. So it's a very attractive quality. I think being very certain, you're rock solid certain about something can be a big turnoff. Yeah. And so it goes that's the other side of the coin about a lot of this stuff.
Well, I think when someone is willing to share some of the challenges or issues, especially when you're amongst some peers, if in the business world, and all of a sudden you're talking about things that, let's just say it's a sales challenge, whatever it might be. That's a common one, right? We all want to sell more. And all of a sudden they start asking you some clarifying questions, or where you're looking at this data, look at it, and deep down, this is stuff I should know and I don't know. And you're willing to sit in there and take that and give that. I think there becomes from the people asking there's a respect factor, because first off, they all know they don't do it all right and perfect as well. And the fact that you're willing to share this, I think it's almost impossible for that trust not to build and that rapport to build, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And to me, I'm just fine considering it a litmus test. So if I start being vulnerable and I start admitting that I don't know for sure, I have some ideas, I have some options, I have a game plan that might work and it may not. A lot of life is an experiment. A lot of business life is an experiment, and they don't buy into that. They don't like that. I'm happy to have that relationship kind of stall out. It's not the kind of relationship I want to invest in. So that's okay. And I think just as I was saying, being honest about what I know based on just my experience so far. The world's ever changing. I'm changing. Everybody else is changing. So what worked yesterday may not be the best approach tomorrow. We don't know. And so you got to just be flexible and adaptable. And that's okay. And I as I've gone through so much of, my journey, which has been, I think I self-classify as being very successful. I'm willing to go with my instincts more and more. And if it doesn't feel right to me, I might not really understand why it doesn't feel right. I have to spend some time and effort to figure out and break it down into parts, because I think intuition is this massive thing that comes, big ball of wax, and you got to separate the parts. So I usually get down to what the parts are, and I think I'm not just making it up to put on something on paper about it. But if it doesn't feel right, it's not right. It's not. At least it's not right for me. Let's just limit it to that.
Well, we're built with that we have that in us for a reason. And I think some people don't trust that instinct or that intuition because maybe they don't believe in that type of stuff. But I do. That doesn't mean I make business decisions all on gut and feel, but when all the data looks right, okay, if all the data looks right, and I'm dealing with especially a person. Let's go back to your merger situation, right? All the numbers, like this is the company we should be merging with, but every time you talk to this person that you're going to have a close working relationship with, in your gut, it's not. You can't go forward with that because if the relationship's not there and you can't work together, it's not going to. I don't care what it looks like on paper; it's not going to happen.
Right. Exactly so. And I think along the way, it's good to recognize that we all have biases too. Some are very explicit and some are really implicit. You really? No, I'm not biased that way. But I'm biased against big giant companies, frankly. Not that there aren't some great big companies running around, but as clients, I don't want to have them as clients. I want to be dealing with, the person who is the founder or who owns the company. I'm not interested in dealing with, something else. So it's a simple way to talk about a bias, that there are deeper, harder biases, and to own up to those, to investigate those from time to time. Also is part of this whole thing of recognizing my own limitations and vulnerabilities. And sometimes I can work with it. And sometimes I find myself kind of at a wall with it. But, owning up to a bias is a valuable thing too, I think.
All right. So we've got these great connections. We've built these incredible relationships. And then inevitably in business, something's going to happen. We got a conflict, a disagreement. How do we, what's the best way to handle those? You've done all this work. You've got this great, and when I say work, I'm not saying like I'm trying to build this relationship, right? You're just doing things to where it's natural and it happens.
Yeah. That's
you got a conflict, disagreement. What's the best way to handle those situations?
I think there's a bit of a formula for this, and I don't mean formula like in a mathematical sense that 2 + 2 is most absolutely going to turn into 4, but more about asking yourself and at the right time engaging with whoever you're having this conflict with some questions. So asking questions opens the door. It's not you coming up with your answers already and being forceful about it. It's being open about the question. So why do you think that? Why do you think that? Why did you do X? Openly, not in an accusatory way.
Or going back to your curious, and you're going right back to what you said earlier, right? Questions. So
that's right. Questions so important. I see this. I mean, I have a fantastic relationship, 45 years now with my wife. We've been married for 43 and, 2 years in the run up to that. And when I find myself feeling a little irritated about something, And I think to myself, well, I just don't understand why she would do that or why she would say something like that. And rather than blast her, I would try to catch my breath, take a moment, find the right time, try to make sure it's a good time for her, and say, by the way, why did you do that? I was curious. You seem to think that was a good thing, and just pause then. And if I have the right tone of voice and I ask it and pick the right time, then she'll let me know. And sometimes I'm surprised. I go, well, that's a really good idea. I'm glad I asked you, and I'm glad you told me what was going on there. And it changes the whole thing from me being upset about it to a different place. I think it also helps to remind me in my relationship with that person, again, personal or professional, that I'm here with an attitude of being there for them and being of service. If it's a it could be a friendship too, of being service in the friendship, and that helps me get through some of the conflicts as well. So you were talking about ego. You're talking about, related to fear. And so I have to kind of check myself. Is this really about me knowing better? I write in the book that most people run around with two basic thoughts in their head. I know better, or everybody's out to get me. Right? And you think about that, oh my gosh, they're both crippling. They're absolutely crippling things. So if I can catch myself, I usually am not the everybody's out to get me person, but I am very much, finding myself thinking I know better, and that's what's leading to this conflict. So I think the conflicts can be reduced, melted down by just starting from a different vantage point. If you know better, that's a problem. If you come at it with hostility, if you're coming at it with a lot of ego, if you're afraid, these are all things that you need to look at yourself. You need to be in touch with what's going on before you engage. And if that means, walking around the block, taking some deep breaths, saying, I want to talk about this, but I'm not ready yet. I'm really not ready to engage about that. Then, okay, maybe it's good to sort of mark it as an agenda item. Maybe not. Maybe that's not a good idea. Do you have to kind of make a judgment about that?
Yeah. So you and I think it's safe to say we're in full agreement in terms of the value and importance of developing good relationships when it comes to, obviously in personal, but even, equally in business. So let's pretend some young entrepreneur has hired you to be their mentor, right? And I look at networking events, right? Here's an opportunity. He's going to have a lot of the right audience. His target audience in terms of business will be at this networking event. And most networking events are awkward. I would say 80%, if not higher, of the room show up, and one of two things typically happens. You got the one guy, and he shows up and he sees someone else he already knows. And so they go over there into the corner and they talk to each other the whole night and accomplish absolutely nothing. Or you got the guy or woman that goes out and they end up with 20, 30 business cards. They go home, they put them in their purse or their pocket, and no one ever talks to each other again. And so it's almost forced. So for the young entrepreneur that maybe they're a little introverted, or maybe they're not they don't feel as comfortable with themselves like you brought up earlier, what advice do you give them so they can become better at networking and building relationships quicker?
Let me suggest a couple of things. One is that you have to know your limits. Partly it's, you were saying sometimes you don't sleep well, or maybe you're just kind of overwhelmed. There's a lot going on, and adding one more thing is not a positive. It's actually counterproductive. So you have to kind of know how you're coming in to the situation. Uh, there's there's something I came across. I love this. Let me see if I can pull this out. It's There are four things that we can control right now. That's our attitude, our effort, our behavior, and our actions. I just love that. Attitude, effort, behavior, and actions. It's probably some acronym if I work hard at, working that. But if you go into an event, and it could be an event with lots of people, it could also be just a one-on-one where you're not ready to take the next step. You're at full. You don't need another contact. You don't need another thing to have to deal with. Then maybe you should skip it. Maybe you just should skip it and wait for a time when you are ready. Another thing is, again, back to this introverted extrovert thing. Oh, it's actually that's more technical. Shy or, very outgoing, very social, is the question of where do you function best? If you're really not good at lots of people and you're going to run off into the corner and talk to that one person, why even show up at the event at all? Just got to know yourself and kind of work the situation so it works to your advantage. And I would say it's also important to make the commitment to not only personal growth in this area, because we can all grow, but also that if you are going to make a contact, to follow through. Don't just put it in the trash can. Don't just, forget about it. Follow through. Everybody's a real person. And who knows? There could be big, giant bonuses. Maybe very little will come out of it. That's okay. That's the odds, especially in with volume. Large numbers. You meet 50 people, and 3 or 5 are going to be people you want to keep going
That's
with.
right.
That's okay. That's completely fine.
And what people don't understand is it really only takes one person. I mean, you have no idea how that's going to spider web out. This person, I mean, it just spider webs, right? And so, man, I really appreciate this conversation. I went into it knowing I was going to enjoy it because I meant what I said. It really hits me on a deep level in the sense that it really hits home with me, and I was excited about doing this. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet? Maybe one last tip you'd want to give the audience when it comes to building or the importance of, business relationships?
Well, I think relationships are absolutely indispensable. I mean, yeah, we read about a story here or there about somebody who's off on a desert island or off on the mountaintop all by themselves. Well, I frankly don't know anybody who would say, oh, yeah, I want to do that for like forever. Get away for a week or two might be a really great idea and a very welcome idea. But in general, that's not the world most of us want to live in. We want to live in a world that works for us and has relationships in it. A lot of us struggle with the notion of relationships that are not great. It starts with how you grew up, frankly. There are a lot of things that happen to us as we're little kids where we're not in control of much of anything. And there's some stuff that went on either between our parents or, between mom and you or dad and you. And it leaves some wounds. And a deep dive into looking at those, maybe getting some help to remove that stuff will help. But anyway, that's baggage. That's kind of, you come from these places and then you make a commitment to yourself. What kind of person do I want to be? Do I want to be the kind of person where, and this is a quote from Zig Ziglar, the great motivational speaker. I think he lived for a long time in your neck of the woods there, Scott. Be the kind of person where if somebody said something bad about you, no one would believe it.
Great advice.
That's huge, and we're talking about money. Do you want to treasure your possessions or do you want to treasure your relationships? Well, you can say they're both pirates, but I think the treasure is in the relationships. And these are choices. These are big, big choices that if we're driving our own bus, we're deciding who we are as people, effective people in the world, as business people or just human beings, we can make some choices around that that's attractive and fulfilling.
Well, outstanding interview. I want to thank you, Rand, for sharing your insights and your expertise when it comes to building deep business relationships. And really, we got past just business. I mean, this goes for personal business. It doesn't matter. But your perspective, what kind of rings out to me is all of this works when you're authentic, when you're true to yourself. And you kind of touched on that in the middle of this interview, in the sense that when you're being your true self and your authentic self, you're more comfortable, and all of this becomes easier.
It's absolutely the case. It takes work, though. This doesn't happen with the snap of a finger. You got to be committed and motivated to yourself. I mean, if you want to think about being selfish in this realm, I'm fully endorsing that.
So everyone, I want you, Business Bourbon Cigars community out there, be sure you visit Rand's website. It's randselig.com to learn more about his book, Thriving: How to Create a Healthier, Happier, and More Prosperous Life. And now this is an easiest way to connect with him directly. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe to Business Bourbon and Cigars on wherever you get your favorite podcast platform. You can also go to the Me Plus Ultra website, meplusultra.com, and you can subscribe there as well. But make sure you leave us a review and really let us know your thoughts. We try to improve the show as much as we can, and we do read those. Until next time, keep building these meaningful relationships and connections and thriving both in your personal and your professional lives. Cheers.